Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming here tonight. It's a pleasure having you guys. Fantastic presentations. So the topic for the panel tonight is go-to-market, but I know we've got a few validators in the crowd as well, so I'd like to touch on some of those topics as well. We're all sharing we have massive overlap in terms of validator sets, and stake.fish as well obviously participates in all of our networks, so I think it'd be fantastic to do that. What I want to start with is sustainable growth. I think we've seen a lot of projects make several attempts at succeeding in the space. I think we've seen some examples where projects have tried to throw money to incentivize developers to come on board, and it's been really successful in the short term, but it's slowly faded away. Some are still fading, others have kind of just dropped dead straight away. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can actually do that, not just get the initial adoption, but make sure that adoption stays here with us in the longer term as well.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting, I think, philosophical debate around how you bootstrap your network. And one of my kind of having done startups before, and one of the worst feelings ever is when you build all these things and you get so much money and people involved and then you don't have demand. And so you really want to suss that out yourself. So we have a policy, we don't give any tokens at all to projects, dApps. We will fund them, we'll give them an amount to run a scale chain, a small chain for a period of time, but we don't want those individuals to feel like they're making decisions because they're getting paid and they're going to hold an asset that they can personally exchange for money. And it's different. Validators and delegators, you have to bootstrap those. I see that as the supply side of the network. But we all are trying to vet the fact that these networks have real demand and they're going to be used. Because if they aren't, I don't care how good the marketing is, how much fundraising you do. If 2 years from now, the market will expect usage on these chains and actions. And so we try to suss that out ourselves and have a policy to really get people building and using the network that are doing it, that are ready to pay, that will pay in scale tokens for the service. And it helps us validate that we have something that have product market fit, and it also helps our validators validate product market fit in the network. But Amazon is famous for giving every decent startup $100,000 of credits, right? But you can't go sell those on the market. You can use those. So I think just want to also distinguish, one is actually a viral marketing tactic to get adoption. The other one would be hey, here's Amazon stock. It's a little different. Okay, my 2 cents, please. Hey, by the way, I just want to say too, it's an honor to be here with such high quality projects. Thanks for pulling this together.
Well, I think it will be a lot of experimentation next couple of years. I don't think anybody has answers. So I think next couple of years will be about trying different things, trying different approaches. I was part of a gaming panel yesterday, and I think there is a lot of similarities in how blockchain gaming evolves. There are 6, 7, 8 different approaches I'm kind of seeing. And similarly, here on the protocol side of things, there are people who are trying different things, approaching different communities, approaching different technology, different execution strategies. So I actually don't have answers right now, but I do think that, yeah, for example, paying projects and things that people have tried so far historically would not work. That's how we think about it. We're in very bizarre kind of situation in the industry where I know some projects that on one hand cannot sustainably fundraise, like blockchain gaming project, for example. On the other hand, they're getting approached by 5 different chains trying to give them money. It's a really kind of weird place we're in, and we're on our end, we're not participating in this. We're kind of not adjusting to this weird market reality, and we don't think it's a sustainable approach. Maybe starting incubator or something like SKALE is doing is actually potentially a good approach, because you can get a lot of insights on the ground, kind of pattern match things and help those early projects and learn a lot alongside with them about their user acquisition and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I think if we jump forward to a world where decentralized systems have really been embraced and taken off, and we have clear pressure for adoption through lower margins in the financial systems and everything that this decentralized world promises, it's a different story, right? Adoption between different projects is more about efficiencies, maybe throughput, whatnot. Right now, yeah, we're in this weird world where a developer may have two chains throwing weird tokens at them with just, trying to entice them one way or another. I'm not sure if you want the developer that ends up on your chain after they've kind of done this weird negotiation between all these chains. But for us, I think it's just about, at this point, trying to make the developer experience as smooth and easy as possible. And I think we're all trying to do our best to do that. And at the same time, continuously talk about the why. Like, well, what's the point of all this? We're not working in the ad space for one. Really bring it back to the core fundamentals to attract the general interest of developers and users.
Perfect, thanks. So the other thing I'm curious about as well, right, is there's a lot of, and I mean this with all due respect, there's a lot of projects that come out here and they try to advertise a number of projects built on them. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job with incubating and trying to take it seriously and helping them raise, right? If they're raising money, it means that there must be something legitimate to it. What do you think do you think this is the best way we can do it? Rather than getting hundreds of applications and just throwing numbers out there, how do we make sure that developers that we are approaching or the ones that are coming in are getting the right support and are actually right support not just in terms of funding, but also finding the right business models and actually having the ability to experiment?
It's tough because like you mentioned business model and then I hear business model, and has anyone figured out a really sustainable business model when you're trying to create a dApp? Like, I don't really think so, unless you're raising tokens, of course. I'm in the camp of just advocating for a lot of experimentation, just because I still stand by thinking that it's pretty early on. There's not enough support infrastructure to help devs who want to create cool, interesting applications just on a blockchain seamlessly. I'm okay with experimentation with failures because that's what we need in order to make sure that like we have tried everything out and then we finally find the one thing that clicks for traditional developers to onboard to like creating decentralized applications.
Yeah, so good question. I think the main, like the meta point here is that we're at a market state where infrastructure has outpaced financing and growth for the application layer. So those of us projects that are well funded, that have big teams, that are building really great platforms, I think all three of these platforms are very performant and super high quality. We're at a state where one of our biggest issues, all of us on the infrastructure side, is like there's not 10,000 enterprise customers for us to go after yet. So we do have to nurture the market a little bit. One of our theories is that we want facilitation is valuable. So if we can facilitate introductions to the open market, to the people that make decisions around who should get financed, that is great. And connecting someone like Multicoin's funded all of us, right? If we connect somebody to Kyle will not invest in them unless they are really good. But that's part of our job, I think, is to make those connections. And then it's up to the dApps and the investors to see if there's a fit. But we'll start seeing more and more dApps get funded over the course of the next year. I mean, we all see this, right? There's huge progress being made. And one of the issues is just that some really great platforms are just about ready to launch their mainnets, which I count us, these projects on stage in that category. So yeah, that's my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. It's again, it's like early days. I think it's like gestation period of this industry. It's not like a growth period where there are like flywheel effect going, like better products, better revenue, like things are not there. It's very early days, I think, and so like on our end, we just see certain amount of projects coming to us. We're reaching out to them, and then we pick the ones. A lot of it is a gut feel. We pick the most like intense out of them, I guess, and try to support them. So like our first customer, for example, he like maxed out his credit cards before that, and he worked out of our office, and then he told me like, oh, actually like have a little bit of a problem. I have like 2 months of money in the bank, so I'm about to go bankrupt. Like, I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier. And so we had to like try to help save his company, and we did. And so I think a lot of it early days will be like going above and beyond for these early customers, hoping that they're gonna work out. But yeah, like there's a lot that like you need to get users, you need to get business models right, you need to get financing in a point in time where applications are not getting funded yet. I think actually Korea is different. Like for example, like Hashed invested a lot in application layer, and in US it's not the case yet. So I think it's a lot of like kind of hustle going above and beyond for early customers, and hopefully some of it will work out, but we don't have like right formula yet.
Yeah, I think I just kind of think of it maybe more almost from a team resourcing issue. You know, we're all racing towards mainnet in Q4. We're all building validator networks and launching incentivized test nets. And it's really hard also to be thinking about product market fit and what apps should be built and what part of that should we build and how can we attract the right teams. I actually like the beta program that Nir's doing, where you know, it's like, listen, we want to help the developer community. Let's build a pipeline for that. Let's make it focused and provide resources where we can. Kind of a little more targeted, focused approach. But I also worry that that's it's kind of missing what you don't know. Like you want the experimentation out there too, and I think we see that right now. It's DeFi. We've kind of gone through a couple phases. It was gaming. It was NFTs, and so we're all kind of poking around at the edges to try to find out where it's going to fit. But I think it's just a really hard time right now with everybody sprinting.
Yeah, I guess I just had like just listening to the answers. I guess I had like sort of a controversial question. Like, though, when you guys are talking about like onboarding developers, it means to your platform, right? And so, in a sense, are you guys concerned at all that maybe you're onboarding these developers, but then like they're not then given the width of like the different protocols that exist in the ecosystem? Like, or do you guys have concerns on that, or just thoughts to share on whether or not we're just creating walled gardens at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. My simplistic way of thinking is any adoption in that realm is good adoption at this point, to be honest. But also, I think a lot of us are going towards platforms that are going to be completely interoperable. You know, we want to build the tools to let any developer to jump onto our platform. You know, supporting native Rust or EVM or whatever it is. Try to eventually expand that out as much as possible, so it's kind of platform agnostic. I think it would be a bad thing to, you know, get these silos.
Yeah, so I think let's take a second and talk about the customer journey in the space, all right? So these are developers, all right? So the customer journey is not one, and by the way, in open source business to developer marketing, it has changed dramatically over the last 15 years. So buyers are more informed than ever, they're more educated than ever, they have more documentation to read than ever, they have more Medium posts and blog posts and white papers, et cetera. And so the game is really making sure that you outfit developers with as much education materials as possible. When they talk to you, they've done their homework. So when I talk to somebody, they've evaluated everybody, okay? And they're smart, and nothing is hidden from them. And that's how you do effective B2D marketing, is you have to create an awareness funnel, and it's anti-marketing. It's about education, it's about information and openness. And so I'm finding these are the most sophisticated buyers in the world, and where they are in their search when they actually talk to you is usually very, very far along. They're about to make a decision. They kind of want to talk to you and make sure everything they're reading is legit. They want to see things, they want to play with things, they want to test things, but That's a reality of business to developer marketing or anti-marketing, and that's what I'm seeing.
I'll also add that there is kind of like, to your point, JK, there's a like weird little bit scenario where I was just talking to one Korean project here, and they're like trying to connect to more chains, because basically what they're acknowledging is that every project kind of have like fractured audience, like every project has different users, and they're saying like, well, it will be very, very challenging to connect to all of the chains, but we actually need to find users on our end, and so we'll have to add more chains. I also know some projects that support like 5 different chains, which is like insane. But I do agree that at some point we need to start thinking about like interoperability and things like that. For us, like early days, it will be building bridges. So we're building bridge with Bitcoin externally. We're building bridge with Ethereum internally. It will be all available by mainnet, but I think in the end of the day, it will be like about bridging everything. And having like one ecosystem, I guess, decentralized internet, where like society will actually win. Yeah, right now I feel like it is a little bit fractured.
Cool. So I want to switch it up just a little bit and start talking about, I guess, token distribution in general, right? Hopefully there's no exchanges in the crowd right now, or anyone working for them. So I think, the IE model's come and gone, and well, not gone yet, but slowly dying out. And some projects have used it as a model, and it gives great liquidity, right? Particularly on the top exchanges. But the major challenge there is that if you do go through models like that, a lot of the people who actually do get the tokens are guys who are holding like $20,000 US dollars worth of, like, let's say Binance or Huobi tokens, and they're the only ones who are really eligible, right? And oftentimes these guys aren't long-term holders, they're just going to dump the tokens and retail market's going to basically absorb it. How do we, like, for JK, for you specifically, what would you like to see? I think for the protocols, how do you think we can do better distribution and better target those who are genuinely committed to either participating in the project or supporting the project or using it in some way?
I mean, so I could speak to the importance of it, yes, but there's a reason why we don't have tokens and we're not a blockchain project, because it's a hard question. Like, I think there's again a lot of experimentation being done, like the lock drop. There's also the work lock by the new Cypher team. There's interesting experiments, but not enough data points. We'll have to, it's TBD on whether these will work out, and I encourage more experimentation to happen, but I'll just speak to the token distribution's importance to proof of stake. I really like the decentralization aspect on proof of stake networks depends wholly on token distribution, because the stake power eventually correlates with how much the blocks you're creating, how much work you're doing on the blockchain. So ideally you want that as distributed as possible, because then that will immediately then translate to a better decentralization.
Great question, by the way. So we've been spending, and I'm sure everyone has been spending a lot of time thinking about this. So I'd break it down into a couple things. So one key point is you have to have the right incentive structure for the project. So everybody on the SKALE core team is on a 3-year vest that commences at the mainnet launch and then locked for an entire year. So that means most of us are on a 5-year vesting schedule. And that also means that the token could be worth this after the first month, but if it's worth that after 12 months, no one on the core team makes up any upside. So that makes core teams make decisions that are long-term sustainable. So that's really critical. And you also have to have the same for investors. So we also have very long lockups with our investors, and that helps. So that's one. Then 2 is segmentation. Who are you getting tokens to? Whose hands are tokens coming into? We are very, very excited about proof of use and getting tokens to the right types of people that will delegate, that will participate in projects, that will actually be involved in the network. And we are working with someone on this, and we're excited to announce it sometime soon, but it's a great way to tee up then exchange listings and getting broader token distribution to, frankly, which is a different set of token buyers. And hopefully that set will also become more evolved and be working more with the stake fishes of the world. But we're going to try to take a proactive step. And a metric that people will talk about, I think, in the future is health of network, as opposed to growth of network during the first 3, 6, and 9 months.
Yeah, so I very much agree with kind of the long-term vesting schedule for core team and investors. Helps for a U.S. company, so we have some restrictions around lockups anyway, but honestly, I think it's a healthy thing. I actually think the whole exchange distribution, I think there's a place for that. I think if that's your main effort, it's very misguided. But I do think it is important to have a little bit of available liquidity out there. However, I think what's more interesting is proof of engagement efforts, because you can get really creative with them. The validator stake distribution is really interesting too, but that's of course where all these incentivized test nets come in. I think it's a really unique, engaging way to do it. And then also I think through, at least Solana has this unique opportunity to provide onboarding into the economy through participation, not only through validation, but through state replication. And so we can do this with basically laptops or any extra storage space, offer the opportunity for people to plug in and earn Solana just for providing storage to the network in this growing ledger. I think that's actually an avenue that we really want to lean into. Hobbyists, college students, anybody, it's a really easy way to learn about crypto, to start, or crypto and blockchain in general, and start participating in the network, and it's a much more organic path towards kind of even distribution growth.
For us, it's also will be a big challenge. We're really principled about both lockups for the team, for the investors, how much we're gonna give to a single investor, as well as for the total pool of investors. As a result, we have, as we planned, a lot of tokens to give away, like 70%, and that will be actually a really big challenge. So we are still figuring it out. It will be maybe 5, 6, 7 key activities. Some of it will be into developers. So for example, what you can do, you can map all of your dependencies in your GitHub code. We have maybe 200 or 300 of dependencies there. We want to give away tokens to all of the open source developers that we used their code basically as we were building Near, for example. That's one example. Then there are a couple of projects in space that did their own distribution kind of successfully. So we'll replicate some of this, but it will be one of those core activities. So I think it will be a number of activities that you need to do in order to really distribute large amount of tokens, and it will be not from day one decentralized. I think it will take quite a bit of time to do that. But yeah, it's still work in progress.
Thanks. So it's probably going to be our last question, and then we'll jump to networking. But we've talked about growth overall, as a protocol. I kind of want to focus on growth, specifically on the validator side. So getting them on board for incentivized test nets and all that is fantastic. The initial validation from validators, as JK just mentioned, typically is a pretty heavy process. But once we get them in, how do we make sure that we can keep them there as well? And JK, I'd love to hear your opinion on what you're looking for from protocols as well, to make sure that whether it's communication, support in some way, or something else.
Support and communication, yeah, those are all essential. I'll talk, I guess, because you ended with that, just with that communication stack. Because we're not going to be necessarily the experts of a protocol right off the bat, we need a lot of support. And the support we hope comes from not only just the project itself, but also from our fellow validators or people who have been contributing to the code base. So it's important to create these 2 channels of communication, one directly with the team and another just a community chat room, honestly, almost, with these fellow validators and fellow contributors to the protocol's code base. That's the support stack layer. The other is trying to make sure that the validators are not all starved out, basically, I guess, at the very least in the initial stages. I think the incentivized testnet is one way to do that, to make sure bootstrap some of these validators' operations. But by no means do I think projects have have a duty to keep the validators set running forever, but I just think it's important to at least help bootstrap at the beginning stages of it. Yeah, so making sure you validators are able to jump on first, and then having enough support for them, meaning all the communication stuff. I think those two are the essential stacks. And then when the validators are already on a protocol, it's very difficult for us to make the decision to actually back out. At least that's coming from us, where we market heavily and we have a lot of stakers, and they trust us, and whenever we launch on a new network, we get a lot of delegations. So it's very hard for us to back out at that point. So so we'll make sure to communicate with the protocols if there's something we don't like. But again, as long as that communication channel support channel is already established, we can make remedies.
Yeah, great answer. So sometimes it's fun to think of non-technical examples of these marketplaces. So like, let's look at Uber, right? So let's say the riders are developers that need to pay for the service, and then the Uber drivers are the validators, okay? So if the drivers are driving around and there's no riders, guess what? They're gonna move off pretty quickly into another network. So the first thing you have to do is make sure there's demand, right? Then the second piece is you have to see the validators as being the real, everyone's an owner of the network that has a token, but in the long run, the validators have to own the network. They are supporting it. And so you have to build it for them. And you have to think about the financial outcomes. You have to think about delegation flows, so it's not painful for them to support the delegators. And you have to really think of them as like the foundation of the network, and make life, make it a good economic opportunity and make it manageable. So that's, that's kind of how I like thinking about it.
Yeah, so good answers. I think I would add that there are some case studies where things did not go as well. Like, for example, like I learned a couple days ago also here in Korea how people got burned on US. There is like really large community of people who you can basically learn how not to do things as well. There are some local Asian chains as well who also didn't do incentives, I think, in the correct way. So I think a lot of it is about incentives. It made me realize like how much more we need to do on our end to make sure that we roll it out in a proper way. And so I think there is a lot to learn from history for the past 2-3 years.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add. I think it's about working with validators to make sure everything's incentives are aligned. The validator business model there's a lot of details to get worked out, and we just want to make sure that we're communicating that we're on the same team, and help as much as we can, whether that's through economic design, slashing mechanisms, programs, because without the validators there are no networks.
I just wanted to just quickly add, after hearing all the answers, that it's also great for the protocols to reach out to validators and help us survive. But I also emphasize that it's also up to the validators to find business models and ways to survive. And so I don't expect the protocols to always be holding our hands and actually drag us through the next 3-4 years. We're trying to stand alone within the next few months or up to a year, and it's up to validators really to try to figure the business model out.
Perfect. Okay, so it's 8:30, time for networking. I know we've got some folks here that probably want to ask some questions, so thank you everyone that came. Thank you for all the panelists. It's been fantastic.